Good afternoon and welcome to a very special interview show of The Prode. How big of a deal are marketing and branding? How does branding shapes the brand equity of a brand? What role does social media play in the positioning of a brand? To talk about all this and much more about branding and marketing, I'm joined by someone who is considered as one of the most prominent marketeers of our times and is none other than Trupti Bhandari. Trupti has served as the Executive Vice President of GSK and she's an author, speaker, and a brand consultant. Today, she is here with us to discuss her book, Brandvantage, a 12-week master plan for brand leadership and beyond, co-authored with Arvind Bhandari and published by Penguin. The link to the book is attached in the description box below, so do check it out. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your time. A very warm welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for calling me. It's a pleasure to be talking to you, Ritwij.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, I would like to begin the discussion by asking that what made you write a book on this topic and what was your motivation behind that?
Okay, so a lot of books have been written on brands, and we ourselves have also written our first book, which was Pragmatism. However, we felt that when books write on brands or when people talk about brands, they normally focus on the functional competencies that are required to run a brand. But in all our experience, it is visible that the success of the brand depends as much on the brand manager as it depends on what exactly happens with the brand, right? So, for instance, a brand, and this book is not only about a brand manager who is a fresher, but it is a book about anybody who's coming new on a brand. It could be a fresher, it could be a startup or an entrepreneur who's launching a new brand. It could be a seasoned brand manager on some other brand, or a marketing manager or a CEO on a brand who's taking on a new portfolio, or somebody who's just walking in from an experience in sales for 10 years but has never done brand management. And we feel that it is important that when this person, he or she, comes on the brand, it is important to understand the brand in a particular way, and then what are the aspirations and the vision that they put for the brand. And depending on all of this, which is the functional competencies that you require for the brand, as well as the soft skills that you require as a brand manager to be able to galvanize all the resources around the brand and run the brand efficiently, is what makes for a leading brand or an iconic brand. And that's what we've covered. So it's a combination of functional competencies that are required on the brand, which could be communication, segmentation, targeting, positioning, digital marketing, the requirements of all that, as well as your soft skills. And we've actually put in a framework called the Stripes framework, which we can talk about a little later, which talks about the skills that a brand manager needs to have. And if he doesn't have, then what is it that he or she needs to take from the outside world? Because a team is what runs the brand, right? So how does he or she look at those skills from others so that the brand equally is complemented with all these skills to be able to run effectively? So that's what the book is about. And we feel that this is a topic which has never been touched before, but it is extremely important to make a true iconic brand.
Yes, ma'am. You mentioned about your book, Pragmatism. So how much time did it take for you and Anvin to finish this book? And how different is this book from your previous one?
So we took about a year and a half to complete this book. Uh, Both of us have managed a lot of businesses and a lot of brands, some iconic brands like I have managed Dettol, Horlicks, Boost, Crocin. He has managed Maggie, Pepsi, Everyday, Milkmaid. And we said, let's bring together our experiences and our experiences of running the brand as well as observing others, other CMOs, other marketers who have run brands. So it took about a year and a half because it does have a lot of case studies. How is it different from Pragmatism? So Pragmatism was our first book which we had conceptualized simply because we felt it was important to understand marketing in the Indian context. All our frameworks, all the books that are written are either written by Western authors or written by academicians. But you do not really have books written by Indian practitioners. And
Ma'am,
that's
I
the
want to add something. Like I'm studying marketing here in the UK, and I feel that whenever I go to my library and when I look at the marketing section, it's filled by the foreign authors. I mean, Kotler is the exception, but not exception, but Kotler is like the legendary book, which we can say. But the rest, all the other books are, of the foreign authors only. Yeah.
So even Kotler, it might be legendary, but it is based on Western frameworks,
Yeah.
understanding Western consumers. So
Yeah.
in fact, some of our uh, some of the people who read through the book and who have gone through their endorsements have actually called it the Indian Kotler. Because see, we really felt that the Indian society and the culture is very different, and marketing is a subject where you need to get into the consumer's psyche to be able to really speak to the consumer and then give her what she wants so that she can go and embrace your brand. That was missing. So we put down frameworks which were relevant to the Indian community. We put down an understanding of the Indian society and how even segmentation was done with an Indian consumer in mind, which is very different from a Western consumer. See, you can actually have a communication which is common for the whole of Europe, and which is also not very right because an Italian is different from a French. But there are more similarities, whereas in India, while again there are a lot of similarities which unite the Indian consumer, there are a lot of these small nuances which are important to understand. So pragmatism was about understanding the Indian consumer and then putting down what is it that is required to win the Indian consumer. How does a company put down the vision? So it started from that level. It started looking at the business from the right, from the top to the business, coming down to brands, and then even looking at things like corporate so CSR. How can a CSR help the future of a brand? So it went into all that. So it is a complete marketing book, which can be embraced by any entrepreneur or a CEO or a brand manager in order to lay down the basics of how to run a business in the Indian environment. Brandvantage, on the other hand, is a little more focused on brand management. So it tries to understand where a brand is in the organization itself. So you could be a major brand who is the one and only, like a Coke for a company,
Yeah.
or biggest brand in the company. Like you have lead brands in Unilever's, Nestle, GSK, where you have Horlicks is the biggest brand in the company. So the way a Horlicks is run will be different from the way a Prosin or an Eno is run. So it brand vantage starts from understanding what the brand position is in the organization, and therefore what is it that is required. Is it becoming the category leader? Is it taking up share? Is it becoming the most profitable brand in the organization? And then running it accordingly so that the whole brand flourishes, but it helps the business to flourish accordingly. So that's how the difference is. One is about brand and the brand manager, the other is about marketing in the Indian context. And pragmatism, thankfully, has become a bestseller and has sold almost, it's sold over 5,000 copies, definitely, running into the next lot now of 10,000 and doing really well. Brandvantage is the offshoot and the smaller cousin who has just come out. So, hoping that, more and more brand managers can take advantage of our experience on brands and running them successfully. In fact, one other thing is, in pragmatism, one of the feedback that we had got from a lot of people who had read the book was that they wanted more of our own experiences of brands. So while we had put a lot of experiences in that book, but they were more of experiences from the industry, whereas in Brand Vantage, we have put down experience of our own brands. So there is Horlicks, there's Pepsi, there's Lay's, Boost. We have spoken about what were the challenges that those brands faced and how they encountered those. So it's very, very, very live the way the book has been written down.
It's a very brand advantage is a very interesting name. So can you please share the story and idea behind the name, like why you decided to go with this
So,
name?
yeah. So if you see, we are both marketers. So the least we can do to our book is give it a very catchy name. Even pragmatism, for that matter, was a very different
Yeah.
name and really caught the eye of everyone. Brand vantage, similarly, it's all about how to give advantage to the brand. And I mean, the name really speaks for itself. So when we were just thinking of what to call it, there were a few examples and a few names that we got in our mind. We did take a little while actually to come down to this name. But then we thought the name itself has to tell you what you're picking up the book for. And if you want your brand to become a leader, then the most important thing is how is it that you are in a position of advantage, both as a brand manager and as a brand, to be able to lead. And that's where we put the name Brandvantage. It actually also talks about putting it in a vantage position, so it works both ways.
Yeah, indeed. So, what are some of the key issues related to branding highlighted in your book, and why did you feel of the need of the addressing those issues?
So we have tried to speak, as I said, a brand can be in different challenges or opportunities. And we have tried to cover all of that. So when a brand has a challenge, in the sense it is not able to grow and it's declining, then you need to look at the brand very differently from when a brand has been launched, but you need to accelerate it. And those are the kind of things that we have put down in the book, because the way to look and the execution and the strategy required for both those brands is very, very different. So we have tried to take example of a brand wherein the it's a market leader, but it has been declining because and because it's declining, the category is declining, and it itself is also losing share. What are the steps that you need to take? How is it that you need to approach the consumer? Do you need to relook at your communication? Do you need to relook at your innovation? Because sometimes a brand may become a fuddy-duddy brand if it's been in the market for a long time. How do you contemporize it? So all those issues have been tackled on that brand, which needs to show a turnaround. Whereas another brand is when it has been launched, it starts well, but then it sees stagnation. What are the places? How do you expand that brand? Those steps are very different. So we have tried to look at brands and give examples specifically for brands in different situations of challenges and different situations of opportunities. We have also looked at digital marketing and seen how, because today everything is about digital marketing. You can reach the consumer in so many different ways, and you can reach the consumer in so many different times. So we have shown the various tools of digital marketing with replete with a lot of examples to see how you can reach the consumer when he or she is most likely to take notice of you. And not just that, not just buy your brand, but buy into your brand, which means the consumer themselves become evangelists and start talking more and more about the brand and doing the selling job for you without even realizing, because they are talking so much positively about your brand. So those are the things that we have detailed out in the book,
Yeah,
and it's relevant to today's situation, because what was relevant 2 years back is not, or 3 years back, pre-COVID,
yeah,
has
pre-COVID,
changed a little
basically.
bit. Yeah, it's changed a little
Even
bit.
now, a new chapter has been added. We can say pre-war, like pre-war and
Yes,
post-war.
yes. So we have tried to make it as contemporary as possible, and while giving examples, which are live examples, as I said earlier, so that you can actually see if your brand falls in this position. We have given some frameworks and some toolkits, so you can actually ask those questions about your brand and then see what should the answers be, because there will be a lot of customization when it comes to your own brand. But we've given frameworks which will help you analyze the brand properly. So it actually starts with how to analyze the brand. If you look at the chapters in the book, it follows a 12-week thing, and for that was important because you don't have all the time in the world to run a brand. And when you come in fresh on the brand is the best time to understand the brand in its complete detail, because after 2 to 3 months you're expected to show results. Then you don't have time to understand the brand. So we have put down a week wise handbook. Literally, what is it that you need to know and do in week 1, week 2, week 3, so on and so forth, up to 12 weeks. When you have got a complete hold of your brand, you more or less know what is it that you need to do on the brand, and then you start executing and actioning that after 12 weeks, so that the results by eventually you can not just pull the brand out of the situation that it is in, but actually make it very iconic,
Yes, ma'am.
cult brand as we have called it.
Yeah. Now, another very important topic highlighted in your book is brand leadership. Now, coming to brand leadership, so how do you see this as a concept, and how different is it from the traditional form of leadership?
So traditionally, a brand leader is one who has the highest market share, right? So if you look at in any category, you say okay, this one is a market leader because they have 40% share or 50% share, which is highest amongst all the other players in the.
Yeah.
However, to us, brand leadership is not just that. That is just one tick. Brand leadership is about how the consumer thinks, perceives, and feels about the brand, most importantly. So the brand leader has to be something which occupies not just the position in the market, but also the position in the mind. So, and so much, and the heart actually, so much so that when I spoke about cult brands, see, there are brands like Apple, okay? These are iconic cult brands which have moved beyond the market leadership. So today you might find a Samsung which is neck to neck. But when the owner of a brand like Apple has a different level of pride, if you ask an Apple owner, will they buy a Samsung or a Sony brand? They will probably say they can't even think of it. And
Yeah.
I'm one of them actually. So they can't even think of it because the brand is here in their mind. And they feel that they are not just customers and consumers, but they are owners of the brand. So they will go any length to talk about the brand, to do things on the brand. And they become, I used the word earlier, evangelist, which is when they talk about the brand, the pride shows, and they make an effort to do positive word of mouth. So that is where you need to reach your brand, because then it is in an unshakable position. We have Indian brands like Fab India.
Yeah.
Consumers of Fab India have a lot of pride, when they wear Fab India. And Fab India, in their own thing, makes an attempt to keep alive all the time, by introducing, by expanding from just garments to culinary items to accessories to household items. Everything that they do, there is the consumer feels that, the brand is doing something right. And therefore, this position, when you achieve, it's a very important position, but a very responsible position, because you've been observed at all times. A Harley Davidson, again, is another example, where it is beyond just having the bike. Then everything that you do as a brand is noticed, and everything that the consumers do as owners of the Harley Davidson group does also falls back on the brand. So it is a very different level you reach, where you have completely in sync with the consumers. And as I said, it's such an unshakable position that your competition might do anything. They might drop prices, they might do, but your position is withheld, because you don't hold just a rupee a transaction, a dollar transaction, but it is a transaction of the heart. And that's where you need to reach. And to do that, you have to be able to demonstrate that you have the brand essence is very strong. Every brand has to have an essence which is beyond just the product and selling the product.
Yeah.
It has to have the philosophy that the brand stands for. And when the consumers identify with the philosophy, that is when you become a true brand leader for them.
Yes, ma'am. Now, so how important is discovering your brand identity, and how big of a role does brand identity plays in the business of that particular brand?
So it's very important, because your brand, like a person, you when you know an ex person, that person stands for something. And every time you do something, you expect the person to react in a particular way, because the personality is what you know. Similarly, every brand has to have their own identity and personality, and that is what consistency is about. So you may do some changes depending on the changing environment, but your essence and what you stand for has to be at the core, which is consistent. And for instance, if you take an example of a brand like a Dettol always has to stand for the first hand uh, hygiene, where it protects the consumer from the user from falling sick,
Uh,
right? Because
Ma'am, the
it protects.
recall value of Dettol is that high that whenever we think of an antiseptic lotion, we automatically think of Dettol.
Think of Dettol. Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Because, and it has always stood for 100% protection.
Yeah.
Now, tomorrow, if it suddenly launches a moisturizer, you
Yeah.
know, it doesn't make sense, because it may add a moisturizing property to your protection, but it cannot become. So the essence is very important. The essence is protection. And that's how, so every brand has to define its essence very well. And then consistently launch products, launch communication, do actions, everything in line with protection, then the protection can take you to different levels of protection. It doesn't only have to be protection on the skin. It can be a personal protection gear. It can be anything of that sort. But that thing has to be consistent, that what you stand for and every action that you do thereafter has to only speak of that, that essence. So therefore an identity is determined by various things: the way you look, the way you smell as a product, the way you are packaged, what you talk, what you do, how you react, what are the response levels in a particular situation. All of that forms a brand identity, and therefore that has to be really well thought through. And you actually need to have a longish document which exactly talks about what is it that you stand for and what is your personality, character, all of that, so that you're consistent and the consumer knows that when I talk of this brand, this is what I the brand stands for and what the brand believes as a philosophy. So the identity and brand philosophy is very important and extremely important to stay consistent with it.
Yes, ma'am. Nowadays, I feel that even social media presence of that brand adds a lot of value to their brand identity. And what the kind of content that they post, like look at Zomato, like the kind of
Yeah.
content that they post on LinkedIn is, generating a new kind of brand identity of that particular brand among the Indian youth.
Right. Yeah, and actually, now with so much social media, it's that much more important to become consistent, because you can have anybody writing about you, and if the brand is not confident about what it is, then it can go into different directions.
Yes, ma'am.
So,
So my next question is related to social media only. So how social media has changed the concept of branding and marketing nowadays, and how big of a role does social media plays in the brand equity of a particular business?
yeah. So, the interaction with the brand has increased multiple times because of social media. Earlier, the brand interaction was when you bought the product and you had it at home. Now, even if you're not actually buying, you are interacting so much with the brand because people are constantly talking about it. And therefore it is very important to stay present in the right sense on social media. So sometimes you will have some negative stuff written. How do you respond to that is very important. How do you go around positively using social media is again very important. How do you engage with the consumer? So it is not just one advertisement which used to go earlier, on TV or radio. Now every day you have the opportunity to reach out the consumer with a positive message. How do you do that? That's very important. And the other thing is, it's not just one way communication but two-way communication, where the consumers are constantly talking to you and you're reacting and you're responding and engaging them completely, is what social media can do. And it's very important to do it very positively. If you don't do it, you will fall back. If you do it wrongly, there can be very negative repercussions. So you
Yeah.
have to do it really right, and you have to it can be leveraged beautifully. But as long as you're very clear on how you want to use your social media, your strategy has to be really in place, and then you can do wonders with it. So social media is a great opportunity if used well, but can be a great challenge if you shy away from it.
Ma'am, you talked about corporate social responsibility earlier. So can you please highlight like what CSR issues you have highlighted in your in your book?
So, CSR is something which an organization has to do because some of them may believe in it, some of them do it because the government enforces it.
Yeah.
However, when I say CSR, and when we have put, Arvind and I have put about this, we are talking about a brand from a social perspective. Because, as I said, if you want your consumers to really fall in love with the brand, then it's important that the brand is not just the product, it has to stand for something.
Yeah.
And how effectively a brand can stand for something, and how authentically, most importantly, because it is not just getting involved with every social issue that is happening around, but
Yeah.
it is getting involved with that social issue which the brand really believes in, and where the brand can have an impact. So again, to take the example of Dettol, it was about the whole thing of the Swachh Abhiyan, the
Yeah.
cleanliness, because it very much falls in its domain, and
Yeah.
it could really create a positive impact, right? So while there was a CSR happening, the brand was benefiting. There is PNG, which has done a lot on Whisper, and it's beautiful because, yes, as a woman and as a woman in India, there is a lot to do and lot more to offer to the woman.
Yeah.
And as a brand as Whisper, the brand could do it, and they were ensuring that every time you bought Whisper, some of the money that the company earned was going back into developing. Similarly, Horlicks, we at Horlicks we did a lot of things like because Horlicks was all about nourishment.
Yeah.
So we did a lot to do with nourishment in schools. How do they get the right balanced meal? And there were a lot of activities where we were giving free meals to children, which was all about ensuring that they got their daily dose of vitamins and carbs and protein. So if the brand can actually identify those social issues where it can play an active role and create a change in the society, then that's what they need to embrace, because not only does it help the consumers, but it also helps the brand to form the right personality for itself and to have a purpose. And once you have the purpose, consumers will start respecting you apart from just liking and loving you. And when consumers respect you, that's when you can become a true cult brand. So it's very important to identify, to have the right philosophy behind you and identify the right situations, social causes, environmental causes, whatever it be, authentically, and then to consistently go after it. Not just do one campaign and forget about it and change, but to consistently go after it.
Ma'am, I would like to conclude the discussion by asking like two questions. First is that how important or how beneficial is this book for aspiring marketeers or marketing students? And second is that is there anything else you want our viewers to know about the book?
Okay. So I think, as I mentioned to you, this book is relevant and important to anybody who is getting their hands on a new brand.
Yeah.
And especially when it comes to, I think the MBA students will find it very, very useful, because the academic world is very different from the practical world. And what this actually gives is, this is like, as Piyush Pandey has spoken about the book when he read it, he said this is the true bridge
Yeah.
from academics to getting into practical. If you see the book, we have quotes from two people. One is Piyush Pandey and one is Suresh Narayanan, who is the
Yeah.
MD of Nestle India, right? And both of them have found that there are things in the book which can help you take that leap. So you have to have some concepts about branding, but how do you take the leap to actually be able to execute them on your brand so that your brand can actually run and become a leader? Those are the things that are covered. So for MBA students, I think it will be very useful, because they understand they have read about the concepts, and then to see how they were used in the practical world, and to see what are the challenges that can come, and then what actions do you take, will help them a lot. So from that perspective, MBA students, I'm sure, will benefit a lot. And as I mentioned, any entrepreneurs and startups, will really benefit a lot from reading this book, because it talks about launching the brand in different situations. And as I mentioned, the situations that we have covered are turnaround, acceleration, and startup. What is the mentality that a startup has to have when they are launching and running brands? And most of the times they could be single brand companies. So if Paytm is Paytm, right, it has that one single brand. What is it that you need to do? A smaller brand, Uber, or the smaller brands that have come up now, there are also many startups. I think they will benefit a lot. And one thing that I just touched upon was the Stripes framework. So what we have spoken about are the skills that a brand manager can have. And so Stripe stands for S for shaper, T for teamwork, R for research orientation, I for, I'm just going to open the page. Yeah, I for, so this is where it's page 12, where we've explained shaper, team worker, researcher, improviser, visionary, executor, and specialist. So every brand manager may have one or two dominant of these skills, and the others they need to acquire from the others around them so that they can run the brand. And depending on what is your dominant skills, your way of managing the brand will be slightly different. And that's what we've spoken about. And this is something which has never been touched upon by anybody in a book, but it is of immense importance in practicality when you run a brand. So I think that Strive's framework and the way to run different brands differently are the two most important things that the book has covered, and that will benefit anybody wants to make their brand a success.
Yeah, one more question, like, is it just for the Indian MBA students or even the foreigner students can benefit from it?
Yes, so this book is for anybody on the brand. So it works as much for an Indian brand owner, for a US.
I'm asking because you mentioned earlier that it's more into the Indian context.
No, that was pragmatism.
Oh, okay.
Brandvantage has been written for a brand. So that brand can exist anywhere in the world and in any category in the world. It will not. So that was the difference I said, right?
Yeah.
Pragmatism has been written in the Indian context. Brandvantage has been written in a brand context, irrespective of the market, irrespective of the category, and irrespective of the state that the brand is in, because it covers all of that. So pretty much, if you're studying in London, please have a look at the book and read it, and it will be as useful to you as it will be to a person or a brand manager anywhere in the world. Because there are certain fundamentals which we have touched upon for a brand, and the competencies for both the brand and the brand manager, which will be constant.
Yes.
And examples are Indian examples as well as international examples. So
thank you so much, ma'am, for your time. And I would request my audience to check out the link in the description box below and they order your copies if you're interested. And thank you once again, ma'am, for joining and sharing your kind thoughts on branding and marketing.